Another day, another pile of devs misunderstanding Tailwind and complaining about it on Twitter. This one went massive, and I thought it'd be good to take some time to talk about it because, man, I'm just tired of seeing the same complaint that doesn't get the value. In case you missed it, there was a tweet that went really viral over the last week. This tweet, which I'll take partial responsibility for making go way too far. It's a tweet that compares Tailwind to HTML without Tailwind with vanilla CSS classes. We look here, you see, it's a bunch of Tailwind classes. In particular, they're all prefixed with TW dash, which is annoying because they wanted to interop it with some other style solution. Whatever, it is what it is. Then on the right, the solution that looks much more minimal and easy to maintain. It's an important catch though, because if you just looked at these, compared them quick, your immediate assumption would be that the HTML on the right here is much simpler. And in terms of just the HTML, arguably, some amount is. However, that's because half the code is hidden. In Tailwind, you don't have a style sheet that describes the styles of every element. In Tailwind, your elements describe their styles, and the CSS is a syntax to do that quickly. The class names are meant to make it easy to style your elements correctly. And these comparisons are just incredibly disingenuous because they lead people to looking at Tailwind entirely wrong. The reality is we don't look at the HTML that gets output in our browsers very often, if ever beyond some debugging. What we do is look at the application that we built with it and also debug and build that application. And the thing that Tailwind makes easier is making it look good the first time, figuring out where things are the second time, and generally maintaining this code over time. If you have, let's say, span class is author, and you change this to author name, but then you forget to delete the author class. How long until that class actually gets deleted? How long are you shipping CSS that isn't being used to your users for? If I end up using author somewhere else in my application, and I make a change to it here to make this look right, how do I know it's not going to break things other places? There's no relationship between this class name and the places it's being consumed, or this class name and the thing that's defining it. You don't have a good relationship between your elements and how they look at all. And as someone who's written a lot of styles in CSS for years and hated Tailwind when I first saw it, it's a whole different world when you don't have to go hunting through your code base trying to figure out where this random style is being applied from, and you can instead just go to the element and change the thing. Life is so much easier. And here we can see all the things they're doing to this author. And if we want to reuse this, we can make it a component and reuse the component, thereby sourcing everything to one specific place. Or we can take this and copy paste the classes, paste them somewhere else. That's totally fine too. And it also might seem like this is less performant because you're sending so much more HTML to the user, but crazy enough, it's actually way more performant because this minifies incredibly well. If you have multiple places where you do TW top 0, left 0, back to back, you can now gzip that as a smaller number of characters. And if you're sorting the order of these class names consistently, you can gzip this HTML down to almost nothing. And the CSS file that describes all of these class names is generally pretty small. It is used across your entire application. The result is the actual data being sent to the user and the amount of data that is to be parsed and rendered on the user's device is quite a bit smaller in the end. And the only thing we lose is your prettified HTML that you brag about on Twitter. And the spiciest take, and I've seen a lot of others agreeing here, is that this guy on the left is actually more readable because you know exactly how this is going to look when you scroll through it. You don't have to have another file up on the side to compare against. Or God forbid, here's a common one. Imagine in code review, I change author to another class like writer, or I add another class to it like shiny. And I don't remember what that does. Now I have to find the CSS where it is in that PR, which might not have even been added in that PR. So in code review, this shit is worse because you need to know what each of these names is, what each of them maps to. And if it's not adjusted in that PR, you have to pull up another tab or your code base directly to go find where it's coming from and what it does, if you can even find it. It's so much harder to do anything with traditional CSS once you've understood the value prop that Tailwind brings you. And honestly, what I find is every single person who tweets stuff like this, they just don't work with a team. And if they do, the team's backend. I've never found somebody with takes like this that is a regular contributor to a shared code base because these patterns don't work in those environments. Tailwind is the best experience I have had working in a code base over time with a team. It may not be as pretty, but I guarantee you it's way more effective. I'm tired of these takes, and if you look at all the people dunking on this original tweet, myself included, you'll understand. I saw Ryan Florence had a banger. Yeah, we all moved. There are very few people who have been doing CSS for a while, who have worked on teams for a while, that don't see a shitload of value in the new patterns. I also made a meme for this specifically. That's how I feel. First, someone will change .previous button in some other UI and break this one, and nobody will know it until it's in production, and maybe not for a while. Next, the naming will be inconsistent, and the team will have to argue about names for thousands of elements that should never have been named instead of shipping better designs. Then folks will be afraid to change anything in any existing CSS, like previous button, and will write new CSS for both new UI and the UI that introduced it until you're shipping hundreds, if not thousands of kilobytes of CSS, much of which is not being used at all. You can't hover the class names in your editor to know what they do. You can't find all the instances to remove unused CSS, and you'll eventually ignorantly evolve your CSS to utility classes to fix all of these problems until you realize you've built a crappy, undocumented Tailwind. Every single one of these tweets is what happens if you build CSS at scale with a team. If you think this is better, you are wrong. Just use Tailwind. And this is why I did the stupid IQ curve meme, because if you're just getting started, Tailwind is one of the best ways to learn CSS. And if you're scaling a team with hundreds of devs, Tailwind is one of the best ways to scale CSS. If you're in the middle and you really want your HTML to look pretty, get the fuck out of my comments. But everybody else, just use Tailwind. Reading DOM nodes is your hobby and Tailwind ruined it. You should sue them for damages. Tailwind makes your app faster over time. Yep. Classic CSS, as your app gets bigger, your CSS gets bigger. With Tailwind, once you've included all the things you're going to include, it stops getting bigger. It's a really nice benefit. I wouldn't say I ever hated CSS, but I was never a big fan of it. It was never really my thing, but Tailwind made me really enjoy it. I think I said all I had to say here. If you haven't already tried Tailwind, why? Let me know in the comments, and check out my video here where I talk all about the different CSS solutions and what their strengths and weaknesses are, and try to frame a new way for us to compare them. Thank you guys as always. Peace, nerds.